Good afternoon, everybody. John Delarose here, the leading Hispanic voice in science fiction, author of For Steam and Country, which is an award-nominated steampunk novel, and of The Stars Entwined, which is climbing up the charts right now. I've been watching it for the last few hours since my piece in The Federalist. I'm a contributor to The Federalist also. Came out, and it's been selling books like hotcakes this morning. So thank you, everybody who's been helping out on that front. That's definitely what we're here to do, is to get our books out there. So it's getting harder to get our books out there in terms of mainstream culture. For those of you who are just joining us, my Federalist article dropped this morning. It's titled "Mob Attempts to Strangle YouTubers' Breakout Success Upon Ditching SJW-Infested Comics." People are very mad at the success of Diversity in Comics, Richard Meyer, myself, and others. And what's happening across the culture is there is an effort of increased censorship from publishers and increased censorship from media outlets who refuse to cover our works, even though we're getting really big with a lot of audience. My article, by the way, this morning is now the number 5 trending article on the Federalist, by the way. That's huge. Usually when I release an article, I get into the top 10, but I've only broken into the top 5 once before. So this is trending across mainstream normal culture right now, the talk about the censorship going on within the community. Now, what happened was, hopefully some people who are joining over from the Alex Jones camp or InfoWars or whatnot and watching this, and not just our typical audience, but a very successful comic was kickstarted by a fellow named Richard Meyer and John Mullen and Brett R. Smith. They're great Americans, great patriots, and people who stand up against the leftist social mob that goes around in the Twitter sphere and in comics and in culture. And they have been talking out a turn for the last year or so, and they've faced increasing harassment over the course of that time. Now, they came out with their Kickstarter or Indiegogo, whatever it was, and they were very successful. They've made now $270,000. John Mullen just posted a couple minutes ago. And I think they're getting close to 6,500 copies of their graphic novel sold, which is off the charts, number one successful in terms of the comic industry. So they had their comic pulled from their distributor because a bunch of creators in the comic book industry, people who are respected by the publishers, who are up at the big companies, we'll call them what they are, which is Disney and Warner Brothers, who dominate the comic industry and don't allow any competition in through their sort of antitrust practices. They've been known for antitrust practices for decades, and they've done it in several different ways. The original way they did so was actually by creating comic book shops. And I know people like to defend the local comic book shop at this point, but the comic book shop was a scam designed by Marvel and DC, designed by comic book distributor Diamond, in order to put comics into a single spot where they could control the distribution of the market. What that allowed them to do was to flood the market with their books, to put their books out there to a point where nobody else could actually get on the stands, because, what are you going to do? Are you going to not carry Spectacular Spider-Man or Web of Spider-Man or Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends or Spider-Man's Dog and Spider-Man's this? You have to carry all the Spider-Man comics. They're still going to sell better than Joe Schmo's indie comic, or let's call it, let's say, Michael Barron's Nexus, for example, which he did with artist Steve Rude, which was very fantastic in the 80s. Those get second priority to Marvel and DC books. And because they flood the market so much, they control that. And once they control the only distribution outlet, which is why they moved from newsstands and supermarkets to comic book stores, they could do that a lot easier. Well, fast forward, and now they're controlling the market based on politics. They've already got monopolies in the market, and every single writer who works for Marvel who actually has a public Twitter profile. If they don't, obviously I don't have any information on it. But every single one that has a public Twitter profile talks smack about conservatives, talks smack about Trump, talks smack about their readers, who in the form of people who are complaining about the quality of their comics lately. And this has been going on for years. Now, it's increased lately. 2018, it's no surprise that this has happened in 2018. Alex mentioned that the midterm elections are coming up, and everybody's been talking about the blue wave, right? Well, they've been gaining momentum both in politics and in culture because we actually made some progress last year in 2017. I came out with my books. They were successful. Larry Correia is another one who's been doing very successful with books. Nick Cole's been coming out with great successful books on Amazon without a publisher. And we're talking books that are selling hundreds of thousands of copies, guys. This makes the comic book industry look pitiful. Is how successful these books are doing, and they're doing it without the mainstream New York publishing. New York publishing is also controlled in a very similar manner to the way that comic books are controlled by an extreme leftist agenda. So all these books are selling without this being a thing. Yeah, and actually somebody said that yesterday. I'll get into that for a second about the propaganda. If you're not with us, you're against us, right? Only a Sith speaks in absolutes. Anyway, so we all kind of came to success last year, and things are changing last year to where the narrative started to break down. There started to be outlets like the Federalist or like even Breitbart's now mentioning some cultural items, which never happened before. And it's as we get attacked harder, these mainstream news outlets are actually starting to pick us up. And what that's doing is showing that we are having a viable business. We are creating good content. We're creating fun content that others enjoy. And these groups are just very scared of losing their stranglehold on the industry. That's what's going on at this point. And they were all very upset at the beginning of the year because they lost the election. There was no way they were going to lose the election, remember? Yeah, it is meme fuel. There was no way they were going to lose the election. There was a 98% chance Hillary Clinton was going to be president. They were preparing their Hillary Clinton comic book special where Spider-Man hangs out with Hillary Clinton. Remember when they did that with Barack Obama, when Marvel made this thing where where Obama and Spider-Man just hung out and were like BFFs, and it was nauseating, right? They were totally preparing to do that. Valiant came out with a book with Faith. Remember, it was Faith that she's the fat chick superhero, and they tried to do that with a Hillary Clinton election issue where Faith was fighting on behalf of the feminist Hillary Clinton. It was terrible. I mean, it was about the worst thing you could have imagined, right? Well. Yeah, they were getting ready to do that with Marvel and all that again, and boom, they lost. All these people went into just this total destructive self-pity spirals where they're saying the world's over, we're all going to get thrown into concentration camps now, it's terrible, horrible. Remember this in the beginning of 2017? Remember how crazy everybody in Unhinged, Dan Slott, was going on his Twitter at the beginning of 2017? Remember how crazy Mark Waid was going at that point? If you think it's just now, it's not just now. Now they've targeted all their fire onto Richard Meyer, which is one thing, but they were targeting it all at the president at the time and at conservatives at the time. So I then sort of noticed this going on in the comic industry, and this is where I kind of started the movement here. When I first started writing about this for the Federalist actually I wrote it on my blog originally. I wrote it on my blog in March of 2017. And I that's when I went through all the Marvel Twitter accounts. I saw every single Marvel writer, not one dissent. Every single Marvel writer was posting this crazy crap about the president on Twitter. And I was like, whoa, how do you not have one person who dissents? How do you not have one person who thinks differently? Well, it dawned on me at that point, well, if they're all thinking exactly the same, they are all exactly the same person, they're all exactly in lockstep with each other, all their comics are going to look exactly the same too. And this is what happened with Marvel, where their comics just kind of went off the rails as a group. There wasn't even a single book that stood out, and that's what people took exception to. So we had this whole year of what happened was once my blog came out, fake news. Rich Johnston over at Bleeding Cool decided to savage it, and he made up something. Because I made a snarking joke in my article saying, "Hey Marvel, if you want a diverse opinion or whatever, I'm a Hispanic guy." and I'm also a conservative. So why don't you just have me write a book or something like that, and we'll change things. Offer's still open, Marvel, by the way. I do a great job on something like Fantastic Four with my science fiction credentials. Anyway, Rich Johnson turned the article into talking about me. I was a nobody at the time. I was just some guy who like had one book out, one novel out, and was doing fairly successful. But I wasn't really involved in the comics world so much. And Rich wrote an article about me saying how not to apply for a job at Marvel Comics. Well, I wasn't attempting to apply for a job at Marvel Comics. I was pointing out the problems with the indie industry. But what Rich did for me in writing fake news and attempting to destroy me, even though he sicked a bunch of people on me who wrote a bunch of terrible harassing comments. You want to talk about sicking, harassing people on people, which is what they accuse diversity in comics of doing. Rich Johnson did this to me personally. I got comments for months. I got nasty comments. I got hateful comments. I got racist comments against me. Rich Johnson is personally responsible for that and has not apologized to this day. So let's put a little pressure on him for that. But it did build my platform because Reddit found this and then it blew up, and that's how the Federalist found me and allowed me to write for a major news outlet. Now, once I could talk about this stuff in a major news outlet, things started to change. And that's what we saw over the last year. We saw building momentum as the critics like Diversity in Comics came out. Douglas Ernst started getting a lot bigger. And then kind of towards the end of the year, we saw Brett R. Smith and Timothy Lim producing their Thump children's book. Right? Now, they produced the first pro-Trump pop culture, and it was wildly successful. And what that did was and we also had Alt Hero coming out about the same time in terms of the Kickstarter, and that was wildly successful. Then, as Diversity in Comics got bigger, he realized, I don't just have to be a critic at this point. I can create my own and do it better. And I've got the platform now that I can actually get an artist like John Mullen to come on board, and so we're going to do this. And so that all built over at the end of last year in terms of our momentum in culture and changing culture. Now, the left can't have that, right? Now, they've been, at the end of the last year, got emboldened again because they know they're losing really hard, so they're getting really desperate. Okay, they got really angry and they got really desperate, and this happened on the political level. This happens on the cultural level. They both escalate like this. So when our political winning started to happen, our culture started to escalate, and you're seeing our culture presented for the first time because now with the internet, there's no way the gatekeepers can stop us getting out here. Well, the gatekeepers are still there, and they are angry because they're losing every single battle on the political level, and they're like, we need to fight back harder on the cultural level. And that's what you saw starting with conventions in January. So look at the convention circuit and how they've been emboldened over the last year. If you guys aren't familiar with me, I was banned in January from the World Science Fiction Convention. It's the premier science fiction convention for authors and people in publishing. And in January, they banned me. They said I was intending on violating their code of conduct. It was a total, who knows, vague accusation, like always, right? And they also called me a racist bully on their website. So, you know how that goes, and then it escalated, and the entire industry decided to circle the wagons and say how I was a terrible person, et cetera. So I don't know any of these people. These are New York Times bestsellers talking about little old me. I'm just a guy who writes a couple articles for the Federalist and makes some independent books, and they're all just talking just absurd trash about me, just like this. Well, that happened to me. 2 weeks later, it was East Coast Comic Con announced that they were going to ban Kevin Sorbo, the actor from Hercules, from their convention, not allow to have him to show up. And they said it's because he's friends with Sean Hannity, who's a racist bigot. And so because he has an association with somebody else, they decided to enact that ban in January. This is absurd. So Worldcon started their thing. They followed, a couple months ago, we then had John Ringo, who is a New York Times bestseller himself. He was invited to be a guest at Carolina's Con. And a bunch of SJWs got on the internet, called him harasser. Does this sound familiar yet? And they're organized. They're organized on the cultural level to try to take us down on the cultural peg because they want us to be silent in order for the election to be influenced in November. This is all a goal to influence the midterm elections in November. This has nothing to do with anything else. And they're trying to diminish us, trying to call us names, trying to destroy us in the exact same way that the media did things with Trump in 2016. You notice every article about Trump was just terrible, and they're escalating their attacks now at this point. We saw this last week. This last week has been about the most extreme it's ever been on the cultural side, with the Antarctic Press thing, with Mark Wade actually calling a company to complain that they're putting out a product that has nothing to do with him. With other creators going on about how this book should not be published, and then with Origins Game Fair, who just banned Larry Correia yesterday, who was going to be their guest of honor at their game fair, which the game fairs are a lot bigger than the sci-fi cons, and because Larry's coming out with a RPG version of his book, Monsters Hunters International, and they're gearing up towards the release of that later this year. And so he's making the tour of the game conventions because he's got an RPG coming out, which is going to be huge because his books sell millions. It's going to be a huge RPG. And within a couple hours of them posting an announcement, SJWs flooded the comments, calling him harasser, calling him racist. It's the same playbook every time, but they have a big organized group who's willing to do this. And they're taking orders, okay? These people are taking orders from publishers and from the media like Bleeding Cool, like CBR, like File 770 on the science fiction side. And those people in the media are taking orders from the publishers in the big New York houses, from Marvel and DC. It's all done quietly in emails behind the scenes or in private Facebook groups where they get together and do this and start these harassment campaigns of conservative artists for good reason. And if you think the publishing houses then are not controlled by the New York Times and the Washington Post, it all goes downhill from there, okay? It all starts here. It goes here, it goes here, it goes here, it goes here. And that's what we're seeing right now. So it's happening in culture big time. And the push is happening. But think about this, guys. Have you noticed there's been just the world has had an energy change in the last month or so? And I think it started around when Kanye West started posting about about his MAGA hat and all that, right? So they've been pushing harder and harder and harder, but the public has been reacting way differently. The public's kind of been turning their backs on this mainstream media culture of hate and division. The public has said, we're going to back Jawbreakers and we're going to back it hard. The public has said, we're going to back Kanye and we're going to back him hard. The public's started to turn as these attacks have gotten even harder. So the censorship starting on the publishing front, because none of us are ever going to be allowed to be in there despite how we sell, which is ridiculous. A smart publishing house at this point would email me immediately and say, hey, John, what's your next series? We want it because you're amazing out there promoting all the time. But they won't because it's all about making sure they keep the ideas sealed. And they think they can't do that. They can't do that anymore with Amazon because I can just post what I want and people buy it. But they think they can still, and they're tightening their grip on that control. They're tightening their grip on what people are allowed to publish in books. They're tightening who's allowed to publish books, and that's happening for sure. And of course, on Twitter, I noticed a couple weeks ago, Twitter started messing with me a little bit. My impressions went down by 60%. Now my audience has gone up. I gain on average about like 10 to 20 followers a week. And this week, when something like this hits this week, I've gained a couple hundred. But usually I'm about 10 to 20, and it's just steadily increasing. Well, my impressions went down by 60%. How did that happen? When my follower count's just going up, is nobody paying attention to my articles anymore? I don't think that's the case. My engagement levels also went down by about, I think it was 25%. So I was like, what's going on here? I started talking about it, and suddenly it went away. So I think Twitter is actually suppressing conservative thought intentionally with their algorithms and showing things on feeds. People did tell me that when I talked about that, they had seen less of my posts lately, even though I was not making less posts. I make a lot of posts, so it's very, very bizarre. But of course, there's going to be over the next few months, publishing is going to be doing their thing. Comics are going to be doing their thing. So we got our cultural group trying to suppress the movement, trying to make sure that we don't actually get anything out there. We will have the news media trying to suppress the movement. Now, the news media does it in one of two ways. One, they don't talk about us whatsoever, right? You will not see the New York Times mention me or even mention what's happening to me, not even in a negative way, because or you won't see Bleeding Cool talk about me at this point because they know I'm effective. They know that if they talk about me, it's going to sell me more books, and so I'm at a point where they can still not talk about me, and I don't matter. And by not talking about me, they do suppress my ability to get my message out there a little bit. I think Richard Meyer and Diversity in Comics, John Mullen, I think that crew is reaching a point where they might be plateauing to a point where they are going to be forced to be talked about by these folk. We'll see how it goes. But we're still talking 6,000 people who bought this graphic novel, right? I mean, it's a lot. It's a lot of graphic novels. It's a huge achievement. But in the scheme of culture, in the scheme of Hollywood, in the scheme of what the New York Times does, those are still numbers that may not even matter, and they still will try that suppression tactic by just having radio silence. And all these people, they coordinate across the board. All the Washington Post, New York Times, CBR, and all these other groups, the next IGN, Newsarama, they all coordinate at the next level, right? Notice it's all the same people saying the exact same things at these websites over and over again. They do this intentionally to create a narrative so that, one, it forces you to buy certain products and forces you to stay within a certain realm of culture because you're just psychologically impacted by that. But second, it also is meant to influence the election in 2018. So we have the media doing on one head of the Hydra here. We have the publishing houses on one head of the Hydra here, and then we're going to have big tech doing our thing. So big tech goes in waves. Remember a couple months ago when we had Twitter mass banning and mass suspending people, and we all lost. I think I lost 80 to 100 followers in one day. I had a friend who lost thousands. It was nutty. They claimed they were getting rid of bots and all that. I've since that implemented had several friends have their accounts suspended, calling them bot-like behavior. This is the new tactic in order to silence people on our side, and they try to do it to like the more normal level tiers. So if you have 80, 100, 200 followers, if they do this to you. There's not. I mean, you can scream, but you're screaming in a small chamber, right? So it doesn't matter so much to them. But by them doing that, what it does is it makes the retweets smaller, it makes the impressions smaller, and so they know that they can hit the next level audience by the next level of sort of the commentators and broadcasters and things like that by taking out their base at the bottom. And that's how big tech will get at the censorship, I think. I think if they tried to silence somebody like me or Diversity in Comics at this point by banning our Twitter accounts, you would have they know they'd have such a shitstorm on their hands that they wouldn't actually go that far. I could be wrong, but you know what? That's what I've noticed in their tactics lately on how they've attempted to silence the thought. So they'll silence the thought by making it seem like there's not much of a groundswell. That way they can make it seem like there's less people caring about these things, and that way it gives more power to the publishing and it gives more power to the media juggernauts. And that is going to be their three-pronged attack in the next coming months, which this is entirely to make sure that you don't get out and vote in the midterms. This is the entire scheme. They want you to not care. They want you to just be satisfied where you're at. Your jobs are fine. You guys are going fine now. What do you care about coming out to the election? Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Nobody's even talking about it. You can't see anybody talking about it because they've all been shadow banned. That is the goal. That's what's happening. Alex Jones is right on this, and we should listen to Alex Jones. But where Alex Jones is missing the big picture, and where all of the conservative commentators are missing the big picture, you can vote with your wallets, but we actually need to vote too. This is a big deal. This is a big deal. I mean, think about the repercussions of what happens with just the overall cultural push and agenda if 2018 goes very poorly. This is what they're attempting to do. This is the end game of what they're attempting to do. We are the small fries that are just in the mix here. So make sure to get out and vote is number one. Make sure to retweet all the commentators who are saying things. Make sure to buy the products of all the cultural people who are producing this. And this is what I need people like Alex to see. I don't know if anybody from InfoWars is watching this, but InfoWars is not talking about the cultural level of this. Mike Cernovich is not talking about the cultural level of this. Stefan Molyneux never talks about the cultural level of this. We need to get our juggernaut going like their juggernaut. It's going to take years, and we need to start building it. We have our alternative new media, which is crushing their old guard media just by people like me just broadcasting on a phone real quick, right? It's crushing it. And on the other front, we have a culture that's building up, but this media never talks about this, and it needs to change. So that is how we're gonna stave off this attack. Once we have our sort of Hydra going, we'll be able to fight big tech better on their level, because they're going to need us a lot more in order just for their own survival. And big tech at the end of the day is, they're open to shareholders and all that. They're companies trying to make money at the end of the day. So they need us. So that's what I got to say. It's coming. The censorship is here. Diversity in Comics, they tried to harass him out of being published. Larry Correia, they've harassed him out of conventions. They've harassed John Ringo out of conventions. They've harassed Kevin Sorbo out of conventions. They've harassed me out of conventions. And this censorship is all taking place in 2018. This is a big deal. As they see that they can do this, if there's no repercussions for them doing this, they're going to keep doing it, and they're going to keep escalating. And that's why I'm fighting hard. And by the way, I have good news to report. I have very good... Yeah, I'll put this up on YouTube once I'm done here. I have good news to report. So yesterday, with Larry Correia's banning, we can fight back and we can make a difference. We are making a difference, obviously, by making a career for Richard Meyer, he's got a comic career now. Next, Larry Correia's thing. I worked very hard last evening on the activist front, okay? I started doing things both privately and publicly in order to achieve a goal, in order to put pressure on Origins Game Fair for their banning of Larry Correia yesterday. Larry does not deserve this whatsoever. I posted things up to 4chan. I posted things up to Reddit. I posted up letting things that know what was going on. I tagged their other guests at the convention, asking them if they were comfortable with conservatives being blacklisted in the industry, and if they were still supporting this game convention. Because think about it. They put pressure on us, calling us harasser, and all that, right? We have to put the pressure back on them. And the only way we're going to do that is by this sort of activism, making it look like there's this critical mass of angry people, just like they do to us. We can be a critical mass of angry people also, very easily. And once we show that and demonstrate that, they'll be scared of us like they're scared of them, and they won't be making these choices where they're trying to harm professional authors just because of their personal political beliefs. And that's the end goal. We want these organizations to stop trying to harm people based on their political beliefs. That's not something that should be allowed in America. It's not. This is not an American ideal. This is not what we're here for. So we can do this. And what I did, I riled up enough people last night to where they got a lot of 1-star negative reviews both on Yelp and on their Facebook page. They got so many comments, about positive about Larry Correia and about with people saying they're never going to go to the con again, et cetera, like that, which scares off other customers. That they actually deleted their post, removing Larry Correia as guest of honor. So they did send a email privately to him, but we shamed them into deleting their public post about a conservative author. That is a big step forward. I don't know what the end result is going to be with the Origins Game Fair thing here, but if we can get them to delete their angry hate comments at us, that is a big step forward. So we're going to have to keep working in activism, keep working and using the tactics that are proven to work in order to get our side heard, in order to get our side to the point where we are respected, and in order to stop the hate. And that is, that's the good news for today, guys. So it's getting out there. Where are we? When we started this broadcast, I was number 5 on the Federalist. Still number 5 on the Federalist. That's doing very good. A lot of people are reading this. A lot of normies are reading this. It's making an influence and impact in culture, and we are on the way up. and that's why they're going to try even harder to silence us. So brace yourselves for it. Speak out. Don't be afraid. Don't ever bow to their intimidation tactics, and we will move forward. Have a good day, everybody.